welcome to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe as always, and check the show out on social media. Hoty Raw Takes on Instagram, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty on Facebook, and on X you can find me at Hoty Andrew. Hope everyone had a great weekend. There was some great football on. Can't argue that. Let's take a look first at those playoff games to start things off, and we'll start things off with that Houston-LA Chargers game. A scoregami, by the way, 32-12. Houston took down the Chargers. I actually picked the Chargers to win the game. I was pretty disappointed by the outcome because I thought the Chargers really were the better team. But honestly, Houston and the Chargers both have some significant flaws this season. Houston kind of really went down the barrel at the end of the year, and I was kind of concerned about them going into this game. But C.J. Stroud and the offense were able to pick it up. Obviously, you talk about some of the turnovers that happened in that game. Obviously, that big two-point conversion really flipped things for the Houston Texans and gave them those additional 2 points. So when I look at this game as a whole, 32-12, obviously Houston taking it. Scoregami. I think it's a great game for C.J. Stroud. I think DeMeco Ryans and C.J. Stroud have proven themselves yet again. I don't see them getting past the Kansas City Chiefs, but having said that, I think this was a statement win by the Houston Texans that maybe they weren't as done as I thought they personally were. And they have a chance against Kansas City to possibly take home their first, I believe it would be their first trip to the AFC Championship if they do beat Kansas City. So I have to double check that, but I don't think they've ever been to the AFC Championship. They've only been a franchise since 2002 after all. But the Houston Texans advancing, and they'll play Kansas City this upcoming weekend, and a good win by them. Utter disappointment by the Chargers. I still think they have a really good quarterback like Justin Herbert. Really good offensive line, but their defense kind of fell apart late in the season. They were one of the best defenses in the NFL to open the year, but they kind of reminded me a little bit of that Cleveland Browns-style defense. But another playoff appearance for Justin Herbert, definitely down the toilet. But I still think he's a good quarterback, and I think the future is bright for the Chargers. But Kansas City's in that division. That's always going to be possibly what holds them back. All right, let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers. I know a lot of people in Pittsburgh are done with Mike Tomlin. They think he should move on. He has 6 straight playoff losses in a row, and I'm going to push the brakes on that. I think that's a little ridiculous at this point. He is a Super Bowl champion. I get it was many years ago, but Mike Tomlin, to even be in this position with the quarterback situation they've had over the last few seasons, Ben Roethlisberger retiring, I don't think really you could fault the Pittsburgh Steelers at all for that. And I think if Mike Tomlin was with any other NFL football team, he would be praised right now. He would be a guy, if he were to get fired, that would have a job tomorrow. I mean, that's how good Mike Tomlin is. People would want him immediately. So I don't see Pittsburgh moving off him. I think Pittsburgh already stated they were pretty much going to stay tight with Mike Tomlin either way. And I think fans of the Steelers, and I'm not even a Steelers fan. I'm a Browns fan, so I'm very anti-Steelers. But having said that, be glad for what you have with Mike Tomlin. The man's never given you a losing season. Having said that, when it comes to this football game, I think Russell Wilson just ran out of gas. Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens were clearly on another level in this game. John Harbaugh deserves a ton of credit. I think he's been coaching his ass off for the Baltimore Ravens, and they've been doing really terrific in terms of that. Obviously, I'm not really rooting for the Ravens either as a Browns fan. They got a tough one coming up against Buffalo, but they crushed Buffalo at the beginning of the season. So I give the Ravens actually a really good shot to possibly win this game this upcoming weekend. I would favor Buffalo, though, because it's going to be in Buffalo, but having said that, though, Baltimore crushed them earlier this season. I could see Baltimore coming in there with some swagger and possibly put on a really good offensive performance. But obviously, they could run the football so effectively. You look at Derrick Henry, you look at Lamar Jackson. It's been a tremendous duo between the two of them. And Lamar Jackson can obviously put on a show. John Harbaugh, as I said, coaching his ass off. So the Baltimore Ravens just pommeled over the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was over at halftime, honestly. But as I said, pump the brakes on Mike Tomlin for a little bit. I really wasn't that interested in this game either, to be honest with you. I was actually at a buddy's house watching some Family Guy episodes. So shout out to Eddie if he's listening. But, I was not that interested in the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game. But, both those teams lost to the Browns this year, so I guess that made me kind of feel a little bit better. But having said that, too, though, the Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, I've seen it so many times at this point. But the Baltimore Ravens clearly are the better team. They're just better structured right now. They obviously have a great culture, just like Pittsburgh does. But they're the better football team at this standpoint, so I was not surprised by the outcome of that game. And then we'll move on to the day games on Sunday. Taking a look at the first one between the Bills and the Broncos, I don't think that was a surprise to anybody either. The Bills were pretty much just the more complete team. I think when you look at the Broncos, they had a tremendous season to even get to the playoffs, probably made it a successful approach. Sean Payton deserves a lot of credit. Probably a Coach of the Year candidate, underrated from Bo Nix, of course. Obviously, Bo Nix is now going to be overshadowed by how Jaden Daniels played because he won a playoff game. We'll get to the Bucs Commanders in a little bit. But you look at what Bo Nix was able to do in that football game. He was pretty much just shut down from start to finish. Buffalo took care of complete business, and that's why I think the Ravens are going to have a rougher matchup with the Buffalo Bills this time around. But I will get into my predictions later this week. Having said that, though, the Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, to me, this is the game of the weekend. I really want to see how these two teams match up against each other. But the Buffalo Bills, obviously, proving to be a much more superior team than the Denver Broncos. All right, let's move on to the Buccaneers and the Commanders. I was kind of heartbroken by this one because Tampa Bay ended up losing when Baker Mayfield's had a tremendous season. But Jaden Daniels has had also a tremendous season. Give a ton of credit to the Commanders organization for where they were. They haven't won a playoff game since 2005. This is their first one. So they have a shot against Detroit, I'll say that. I don't think they're going to beat Detroit, but I think they have a shot against them. And I think when you look at Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, what they brought to this organization to start off the 2024 campaign. They got blown out by the Bucs, but they just rattled off wins after that, and then they got revenge on the Bucs to end the season and ending their season. So give a ton of credit to the Commanders organization getting to where they are now and a chance to play Detroit and possibly go to the NFC Championship game. I don't think that's going to happen. I'll give my predictions in the next edition of Raw Takes. But having said that, that is tremendous performance by the Commanders. Tampa Bay deserves a pat on the back, though they had a really good season as well. I still think Baker Mayfield has deserved a lot of praise for what took place with the Buccaneers this season. But that division might only get tougher. Carolina looks like they're going to be competitive now. I'm not saying Carolina is going to be any good, but I think they're going to be competitive moving forward. I also think when you look at what the Atlanta Falcons are doing, they have a little bit of a foundation now. But obviously, you're going to need to give more time to Michael Penix at quarterback before you even extend anything with the Atlanta Falcons. So I'll leave that there, but I think they have a good foundation. So that division's going to be tougher for them. And New Orleans, I think, is kind of a mess right now. To me, that might be the bottom four for 2025 out of those teams. I think the bottom four team would be the Saints. But having said that, that's the current state of that division right now. Give Tampa Bay some credit. They did have a pretty tremendous season. They did beat Philadelphia and Detroit, but they just weren't enough for the Commanders in that game. And Washington, credit to them, they had a tremendous season, beyond successful, and they ended a long playoff drought since 2005, the last time Washington won a playoff game. All right, the other playoff games, let's talk about the Rams and the Vikings. The Vikings got absolutely smoked, and I think Sam Darnold will not be in a Minnesota Vikings uniform next year. Having said that, though, the Los Angeles Rams, I think they do pose a threat to Philadelphia a little bit. Philadelphia looked a little bit vulnerable against the Packers, but I'll get into that game in just a second. When you look at the way Matthew Stafford threw the football around, the Vikings defense really didn't have an answer until the fourth quarter, and by then it was too late, and that's kind of when Sam Darnold started finding himself a little bit, but not really. I mean, Sam Darnold was a mess in this game, and he was a mess against Detroit last week. And the only two losses Minnesota had in the regular season prior to the loss to Detroit at the end was to Detroit and Detroit and L.A., excuse me. So the Detroit Lions and the L.A. Rams were the only two teams to beat the Minnesota Vikings this year. But they did it back-to-back weeks twice. So they had their number. Minnesota, to me, tremendous season. Coach Kevin O'Connell deserves a ton of credit. I don't see them bringing back Sam Darnold. I just think we already see the light. We know who Sam Darnold is. I just think we know who he is. He's not going to be a guy that performs in those big, big games. Minnesota had a pretty reasonably easy schedule when you look at it. So I think that's a big part of it. So for me, I'm not so sold on Minnesota absolutely taking that next step with Sam Darnold. I think this was a mess for them. Props to the Rams. I give them a hell of a chance to possibly beat Philadelphia this upcoming weekend. And speaking of Philadelphia, the Eagles, obviously you look at Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, and the two offensive linemen, by the way, who barely allowed any pressures on Jalen Hurts. Please, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are the biggest threat to the Detroit Lions right now, and it's not even close. They absolutely pummeled the Packers. Probably should have been by a much bigger score than what it was. I like to credit Green Bay, too, outside of divisional play and against the Philadelphia Eagles. They were undefeated. So kind of a shame on the Packers' part. But having said that, this is how football is. and the Packers were just a mess in the playoffs. I think they're going to bounce back next year. They're probably going to be a bigger threat to Detroit within that division, and maybe Minnesota will be. So I consider Green Bay's future to be really, really bright. But having said that, Philadelphia was the better team in this game all the way from start to finish. Not even close. I think Detroit-Philadelphia is going to be the NFC Championship. If I were to put money on it, that's what I would say. But I give the Rams somewhat of a shot because the Rams played defense really, really well against Minnesota. And if I'm Philly, the Green Bay Packers defense played pretty well against you too, despite not getting many hurries against Jalen Hurts. There were some mistakes made by the Philadelphia offense that I have some question marks about going into this game this upcoming weekend against the Los Angeles Rams. So we'll have to see what takes place for that. But those are my thoughts on the playoff games. Tremendous games, I thought, all in all. The Tampa Bay-Washington game especially, from start to finish, was awesome. I mean, it really, really was awesome. So if you have any thoughts on the playoffs, please feel free to comment on the video below. Like, comment, and subscribe, as I always say. We really, really appreciate it as you support Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Check out the show on social media as well. I want to hear from you just as you hear my Raw Takes. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers yesterday, and they do play today as well. As I'm recording, they're actually about to tip off, so I'm not going to talk about the expectations too much for the Cavs tonight. I think they bounce back in Indianapolis, but looking back on Sunday's game, they were outmatched in the second half. The first half, the Cleveland Cavaliers were clearly the much better team. It looked like they were going to run away with win number 34 on the season. Having said that, Indiana is a very good offensive team. I don't think they're a very good defensive team, but they were lights out against the Cavs here in Cleveland on Sunday. So, and props to the Cavs for this. They beat Oklahoma City and Toronto on a back-to-back. I think playing Indiana this weekend was going to be really, really tough to overcome because I still think Indiana's offense is playoff bound. So, and they did it without, the scary thing too was they did it without Tyrese Halliburton. But that's how Indiana has a lot of good players. They don't have like a superstar. I think Halliburton's the best player they have, but he's not anything else like that's on the Indiana Pacers rosters. You have Halliburton, you have the rest of them. Good players, but not a championship team. But they're going to compete, and they play hard, and they're coached really well by Rick Carlisle. So give the Indiana Pacers credit there. But having said that, when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers, one loss, fine, move on. It's the regular season at this point. I think we know what the Cavs are. The Cavs have had a tremendous start to the year. They had a 12-game winning streak after a 15-game winning streak. So you got to give the Cavs props to that. They took down Oklahoma City, who they're going to have to play again in Oklahoma City. That's going to be a lot tougher to win. I'll let you know that right off the rip. Having said that, though, the Cleveland Cavaliers are taking care of business. You got to expect some of these losses in the regular season, and that's fine. To me, postseason is really where I'm focused on with the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. How will they match up against maybe an Atlanta if they get Atlanta in the first round? Maybe they do get Indiana in the first round. Maybe a Miami, but Miami might not have Jimmy Butler by then. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But to me right now, it's all about what the playoff matchups are going to be, how that's going to roll around for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and how they transform of that. They still have the core four guys. You look at Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell can have an off night, and the Cavs still do very, very well. Jared Allen can make up for some of that. When his size, it's incredible what he's been able to do. I think he should be an all-star. I know he's not getting any of the votes for it. We can't put 4 players on one team in the all-star game. I don't want to hear that. I think Jared Allen's an all-star. Evan Mobley obviously is already going to be an all-star. You look at Darius Garland, an all-star right off the rip. Kenny Atkinson, a Coach of the Year candidate. There's not too much else you could say about how this Cleveland Cavaliers core is working. It's working so well. So one loss to the Indiana Pacers doesn't bother me. I think they're going to take care of Indiana tonight in Indy. But having said that, if they don't, I don't think there needs to be that much pressure on the Cleveland Cavaliers. They should be fine. But, I'll say this. They did lose back-to-back games against the Atlanta Hawks. So if they do lose back-to-back games against the Indiana Pacers, those are potential first-round playoff matchups. Should we be concerned? I don't think so, but I just want to point that out. Whatever your thoughts are on that. And I also want to give a shout-out to the Win Frog, the Cavs Win Froggy. He followed me on X, at Hoty Andrew. I'm really proud of the Win Froggy, so I want to give him a shout-out on this video. Win Froggy, you are the man, and even though we lost to Indiana the other day, I think we're going to beat Indiana tonight. If you're out there, you're the man. You're the man. Win Froggy all the way. Cavs are definitely, I think, on their way to at least one playoff series. We'll see what takes place later on. But yeah, the Cavs are just on fire. There's not much else I can really say besides they're just great. And even one loss to Indiana is not making me nervous at all. I am really excited about that Houston game coming up, though. I will say that. That's on the 25th. The Houston Rockets have been playing really, really good basketball. And Ime Udoka, possibly another Coach of the Year candidate right now. I don't think the Houston Rockets were supposed to make a jump this quickly to where they were last year. But they were really good last year, especially I think they had like an 11, 12-game winning streak at one point. So they didn't make the playoffs, but they had some potential. I'm really excited to see what the Houston Rockets develop into. So that's going to be a tremendous game on the 25th. All right. I think they also play in Houston on the 23rd and 24th. I want to point that out as well. But I know of the game in Cleveland because I'm actually going to the game in Cleveland on the 25th. So Ohio State taking on Notre Dame in the college football championship. My official prediction, I think Ohio State is going to win this game, but I think it's going to be closer than people think. I think it's going to be like 27-21, maybe 35-28. I think this is going to be a much closer game. I think Notre Dame is exceptionally coached. I think they deserve a ton of props for that. I think Ohio State, outside of the Michigan game, has been exceptionally coached by Ryan Day, especially during this postseason run. You look at the Tennessee game, complete game start to finish. You look at the Oregon game that was over by halftime. You look at the Texas game. Oh, my Lord, what a game that was. You got to give props to Jack and to Trevion, and oh, my God, that was just awesome. All around to beat Texas like that. And I'm slowly starting to get over the Michigan loss. And, Michigan fans are going to say, oh, we beat the national champions. At this point, they're not the national champions. They were last year. I think Ohio State's going to be the national title champion this year. Having said that, though, this battle is going to be in the trenches. I don't think Notre Dame is just going to go down without a fight. Notre Dame has been picked to be upset numerous times. People thought Georgia was going to beat Notre Dame. Didn't happen. Some people thought Penn State could beat Notre Dame. Didn't happen. When you underestimate Notre Dame, they tend to come through for you this year. So I want to give Notre Dame the benefit of the doubt of that. I've doubted Notre Dame numerous occasions this year, and it ended up backfiring. So Notre Dame is a team you can't underestimate. Having said that, though, when you look at the Ohio State Buckeyes, they're just so complete all around. And what Ryan Day has brought in the postseason in particular has been incredible, and I think the Ohio State Buckeyes are on their way to a national title. It's going to be really hard to fire Ryan Day after this. Mike Vrabel, obviously, now going to the New England Patriots. I'll give you some brief thoughts on that in just a second. So Mike Vrabel is not going to be coming to the Ohio State Buckeyes, but having said that, Ryan Day played enough if he wins a national title to get another year in my mind. I will forgive him for the national title one more year. But we got to focus on that Michigan game a little bit more. I think that's very, very important to the folks in Columbus, the people in the state of Ohio, and to the program itself, even if you go on to win the national title. But I know, I keep promising I'm not going to keep harping on that game. But that rivalry still stings. Oh, Lord, does it. As I said, Mike Vrabel getting hired by the New England Patriots, some brief other NFL news. I'm not so sure if I like this hire all the way. I think New England's already a rough situation. I think firing Gerard Mayo or putting Gerard Mayo in a position to even be the head coach of the New England Patriots might have been a mistake. If Robert Kraft's going to come out and admit it was a mistake, I don't see why you hire that guy in the first place. I also don't see why Gerard Mayo should have been fired after just 1 year. For a team we already knew was going to be terrible. And there's the Lovie Smith comparison. Oh, he lost the first round overall pick. So, he's got to go. Did he lose that game or win that game, I should say, on purpose against Buffalo to lose the pick? I don't think so. Coaches coach to win. That's their job. It's not to lose. Lovie Smith was probably going to get fired either way. Gerard Mayo is probably going to get fired either way. So Mike Vrabel, obviously a high target for the New England Patriots. I think overall it is a good hire, but I think it's a weird hire just because of everything that went down with Gerard Mayo. I just don't know if I trust the Patriots as an organization anymore. I don't know if I trust what Robert Kraft is doing anymore because Belichick's out the door and Tom Brady's out the door, and those were two key pieces to their success. So are the New England Patriots just going to step up and be the Buffalo Bills next year? I don't think so. Maybe they'll be better than the Miami Dolphins. Who knows what the Miami Dolphins are going to do this offseason? Maybe they'll be better than the New York Jets. They're always a mess, right? I mean, it could go either way. So I don't know. But the Mike Vrabel hire to me is still interesting. Obviously an organization he used to play for, so he's very, very familiar with Boston. He's very familiar with Foxborough. He's familiar with that area, that region. He is an alumni of there, and he is of Ohio State too. So I'm glad he got a head coaching job. He absolutely deserves it. I just don't know if New England's the best situation. Drake May did show some ascending play, but I don't know if I buy into Drake May as being the quarterback of the future for the New England Patriots. I just don't. Seeing the way Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix are playing, the same thing goes for Caleb Williams. I just don't know. I really don't. Tommy Rees is going to be the new offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if I love this hire either. I would have brought in maybe another veteran offensive coordinator, but that might be hard to appeal to at this point because this job looks very, very unattractive. We don't even know what the quarterback situation is. So Kevin Stefanski choosing to build upon from within. I would have considered maybe bringing back Alex Van Pelt. I know that might sound ridiculous, but Alex Van Pelt did a terrific job for the Cleveland Browns, especially in 2020, 2022, and 2023, and even maybe a little of 2021 when we had some backup quarterbacks in there. I thought Alex Van Pelt did a tremendous job. Looking back at it, I think it was a mistake to fire him, and I know maybe it's really hard to bring back a guy already fired, but, I mean, Alex Van Pelt, to me, that might have been the biggest mistake that the Cleveland Browns have made these last 4 years. Not even just a Deshaun Watson trade, moving off of a successful offensive coordinator, I think is really, really stupid. Having said that, when you look at the Cleveland Browns offense, Tommy Rees is going to have to figure out a lot of different things. I mean, he was working with the tight ends, but he's going to have to work on this whole offense now. Do we have the right quarterbacks coach in place to help develop whoever the next Browns quarterback is going to be that's not Deshaun Watson? Is there going to be a quarterback we bring back that's currently here? I mean, Jameis possibly, but we know how much he turns the ball over, and I think that's a concern for all Browns fans at this point. So I'm not so sure I am thrilled about the Tommy Rees hire. I think it's good in the long run, possibly just because you build within the organization, like Pittsburgh kind of does it that way sometimes. But to me, it just seems like this was kind of the best man available. I don't see the Cleveland Browns necessarily getting that great offensive coordinator in the door, so they had to build upon from within. And maybe it's the right call. Maybe it is. Kevin Stefanski already is a great offensive mind. I think Kevin Stefanski takes back play calling now in this situation too, which I actually am fine with. I know there's such an argument in Cleveland over if Stefanski should call plays. I think he's a fine play caller. I think we've seen it time and time again. He's made some really good decisions at times. But having said that, though, it's all going to come down to this quarterback situation. And is Kevin Stefanski going to be able to get who was his guy to begin with? We're not sure if that was Baker. It doesn't look like it was Deshaun. It clearly probably wasn't Baker in hindsight. It clearly isn't Case Keenum, or you look at a lot of the backups he brought in. It's probably not Jameis. I mean, who is Kevin Stefanski's guy? We need to find out this offseason. That's it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Like, comment, subscribe as always, and check the show out on social media. Have a good one, everybody. We'll be back in the normal Raw Takes set this upcoming Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have a good one.